Okay, I think we'll get started. If you're coming from the G&L project, I encourage you to look at the introductory video for this, this series to make sure this is the right place for you. We're going to continue our discussion of electric fields, now in the context of conductors. So we can think of a conductor as a piece of metal, and we want to get some basic ideas down about these conductors. In a conductor, the charges are free to move. So we've sort of talked about this already, but we want to make sure we state that clearly. So if we've got this block of metal, the charges are free to move. They're not stuck to the local atoms that those electrons are not stuck to the local atoms. And we talked about how whether we talk about, yes, it's the electrons that are the physical things that are moving, but because an electron can move, freeing up a positive, we can think symmetrically about a plus charge or a minus charge. So when we're thinking about this, we're not necessarily thinking about electrons and protons, although that's where everything originates. We can just think about a plus charge and a minus charge and treat them identically. So whether it's a plus charge or minus charge, free to move completely freely throughout the conductor. And this has a couple of consequences. The conductor, the electric field inside the conductor must be zero. So let's see why that would be the case. So let's say we've got some charges. This is a charge distribution, and we're going to bring in a charged object close to this. So that's going to create an electric field that permeates through here. And actually, I'm going to draw that all the way through right now. Okay, well, what's that going to do? That's going to tell the positive charges to move this way. They move along the field like we talked about last time. So the positive charges will ultimately accumulate over here, and thus the negative charges move in the opposite direction. And this will do so until there's no propensity to move anymore. So as these start to separate, there will be a backwards attraction between these, such that, let me draw this now. If we were to have these separated now, we would have a field in this direction, right? Inside the metal, because these have separated. Well, if this field was stronger than the bathing field, this external field, then charges would start to move back this way. And if this field was weaker, then charges would continue to separate. So this will reach an equilibrium point where where the field inside the metal is exactly counters the external field. So the field total inside the metal will be zero, because the external field, the magnitude of the magnitude of this external field is equal to the magnitude of the internal field in the opposite direction. Okay, so electric field is zero. If we have any excess charge, then that lies only at the surface. So let's think about this. And we'll kind of do a proof by contradiction here. So we've got some charge in here. If I had a free positive charge here, right, just through Coulomb's law, this is going to be repelled by every other charge. And to minimize that repulsive force, so it's going to want to just move away until it can't move any further, that will push it out as far as it can go, which will be to the surface. So any excess charge cannot be held in the sort of the internal soup of the charges inside this metal. And then the last thing, I probably should have had this as a bullet item too, the field lines emanating from this metal or coming into the metal must always be perpendicular. Because let's imagine, let's draw here a case where we've got this charge and the field line is not perpendicular. Well, we can break that into a normal component and a tangent component. And if we had a test charge here, or a real charge, or a test charge, the tangent component will want to push that charge that way. And it will do so until it can't do it anymore. And it can't do it anymore when there's no tangential component. So this will quickly come to equilibrium where the tangent component is zero. If the tangent component is zero, then the field lines are perpendicular. So whenever we're drawing field lines into a metal, we always have to do so such that they intersect in a perpendicular way. All right, let's look at a couple of special cases here. Let's look at a metal and a single charge. So what I should be careful of is everywhere these arc in, and I probably should be careful here. Wherever these arc in and touch the surface of this metal, then this should always be perpendicular. At least right at the point of contact. They can bend quickly after that, but need to be perpendicular coming into the metal. Now, this will create a polarization in this metal, like we talked about earlier, and it will do so until the field inside here is zero. Now, there'll be field coming out of the other side, right? And there's field up above this charge as well. So there's field everywhere, except right in the center of the field is zero. Okay, let's put a copper sphere inside a parallel plate capacitor. If we're way out on the edges, then our field is uniform field pointing straight down. But there's the presence of this metal, because it gets polarized and has a distribution of charges here, will start to bend the nearby lines, right, like this. And then when we're right near the metal, then we have, and these again should be coming in, should be careful, these should always be coming in perpendicular. And so we have field lines coming into the copper sphere and coming out of the copper sphere. So we get a distortion of this electric field inside the parallel plate capacitor. So we stick this conductor in here. There's nothing the parallel plate capacitor can do to keep that field uniform. Right? If there's nothing in there, then we have a uniform field. But by the presence of this capacitor, or presence of this piece of metal inside the capacitor, then that distribution of charge changes, and we no longer have just a simple parallel plate capacitor. Okay, well, let's talk about an important quantity called the surface charge density. And when we talked about the parallel plate capacitor, we had this area and this Q, right? If we imagine this being very large compared to wherever we're looking, then what we want to talk about, what's better to talk about, is how much charge per unit area. And so we often talk about this parallel plate as having a particular surface charge density. So that's going to be coulombs per meter and per square meter, so that we get the total charge if we just take the surface charge density times the area. So this should probably be a big Q. I'll make that a big Q to match with the parallel plate. We had a big Q on here, right, for a given area. Okay, well, why is this important? It's important when we're local to a surface, local to a conductor here, surface of a conductor. So we've said here now at the surface of a conductor, all these lines are perpendicular, and yes, they can bend, but if we're close enough, these will all be straight. And it will appear as though we're inside a part of a parallel plate capacitor. So right near the surface of this of a metal, as long as you get close enough, it behaves like a parallel plate capacitor, and you have a uniform electric field. And so that's important for doing a lot of calculations when we're talking about the interaction of some charged particles near a surface. So an example here would be like in chemistry, where you have an electrode in a solution and you have ions close to that electrode. Of course, it's complicated by the fact that it's in a solution and all that, but the basic idea is looking at a charge near a surface of a conductor. Well, let's look at an example here. Let's say we have a sphere of radius 10 centimeters and an electric field of positive 7.5 times 10 to the 5 newtons per coulomb. So that means directed outward from the sphere. What is the surface charge density and what is the total Q? I'll make this I'll just leave it as Q, I guess. Okay, so the area of a sphere, 4 pi radius squared. Turn our radius into centimeters, and we get the total area of the sphere. So that's one component we're going to need. Well, if we've got a parallel plate capacitor, right, or if we're acting like a parallel plate capacitor, then from our formula from before, this is basically Q times the area, Q over the area. So this is our formula for parallel plate capacitor, or formula where we're in a uniform field right near the surface. So we don't actually need the other plate here, as long as we're close enough to the surface. And so from there, we can solve for the surface charge density, and we get coulombs per meter again, and then we multiply by the area. So we take this in here, multiply the area, and we get our total Q. So you want to be able to do some calculations with the surface charge density. Now I just want to show the parallelism between Coulomb's law and Newton's law of gravity. So if we look at the mathematical structure here, they're very similar. The only difference is we have Coulomb's constant versus the gravitational constant. And then we have charges versus masses. Now charges can take on a plus charge and a minus charge, so we can have a repulsive force or an attractive force for coulombs. Masses are only positive, so we only have an attractive for gravity. So for example, an electron moving around a proton in hydrogen is mathematically equivalent to a Earth moving around the sun. Okay? The force drops off as the distance squared, and we're proportional to each of the charges or the masses there. Okay, well, what do? We spent most of our physics last semester working close to Earth, and so we worked in a uniform gravitational field. And so if we were to put a mass in that, and so like a mass of this pen or something, right? It experiences a force just straight downward. And that force was just the weight force. Now, we have an equivalent situation here where the force is given by the field times the charge. And we're going to talk about this a bit more. But this field is uniform now. So this is a constant right now. And if this is a negative charge and a positive surface, it's going to feel the same effect. It'll drop to the surface under the electrostatic attraction versus dropping to the surface in exactly the analogy of the mass dropping to the surface in the gravitational case. So the physics is very, very similar. The difference comes in just how we do things. For Earth, there's only one Earth, right? And we just have one G here. For problems involving the surface charge density, we could have different fields. So the field, it's much more likely that we would be doing things where we have to figure out what that field is, as opposed to here, we always knew we were on Earth and G was 9.8 meters per second. But once we're there, everything behaves the same. So we could imagine like a projectile expression that we did last semester for gravity. We can imagine a projectile expression for charges case. So there's a lot of similarities there, which is good because all of what you learned last semester, or a lot of what you learned last semester about physics happening on Earth is going to be very similar to physics happening with charges near a surface. All right, so that's it for today.